On this episode of the Athletic Potential Podcast, we will be discussing ways to decrease arm stress during throwing. Welcome to the Athletic Potential Podcast, your place to come and get answers to your athletic development questions. We cover a range of topics, all related to helping you to achieve your athletic goals so that you can experience and enjoy the athletic career that you deserve. I am your host, Dr. Mike Matthews. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Athletic Potential Podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. I'm excited for this week's episode, another question and answer session that we're going to go through, and we're only going to cover one topic today, mainly because it seems like we've got other questions that are coming through that we can answer a little bit more quickly, and so we're kind of compiling those together in a different episode, so you'll see that coming out here pretty soon. And then we're going to stick with one today that I feel like realistically, if I'm going to answer this question and do it a true due diligence, it's going to take me quite a bit of time to research it and those type of things. But what I didn't want to do is not answer this question right away with what I would consider more of a, do these things or don't do these things, and you'll see a decrease in this, what we're going to talk about. And so not trying to be like coy or to hide any of the or build suspense about what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about arm stress today and throwing, and we're going to talk about ways that you can decrease it. And this is pretty much what everybody's asking about. How do we decrease arm stress with throwing so that we have less injuries? And in Major League Baseball, obviously having quite a bit of injuries right now. And so realistically, this is a question that, when fully nuanced, will probably take multiple episodes, and there's a lot of research that can be looked into it. But what I want to do today is cover more of the quick answers. These are the answers that I give to people that maybe I'm out watching a baseball game, or they come up to me and they talk to me about, hey, how is it I can help my son or even my daughter decrease arm stress so that they don't experience these injuries. And this is the quick answers that I give. And so I wanted to talk about it, but I did have a question about it from a listener, and so we'll address it today. So with that intro, we'll go ahead and jump right into the question. This question comes from Matt, and he asks, I have two sons that are currently playing baseball. One is in high school. The other one is in youth baseball. It doesn't give an age or anything like that, which is fine. But we'll just say youth is like anything like 13 and below, just to make sure that, for those that may be, curious what youth is, it's typically how I classify youth, either the 12 or 13 or below, youth baseball. I really want them to avoid injury throughout their throwing career. What are the best ways to decrease arm stress during the throwing motion? Thanks for the information. All right, Matt, great question. This is something that we talk about consistently all the time, about ways to decrease arm stress. And so without going too crazy into this, when I answer this question, I typically always start with throwing a baseball overhead is inherently stressful on the arm and in the shoulder and in the elbow and on the body, to be honest, depending on how intense you throw and depending on how often and how much rest and those type of things. So ways to decrease arm stress can, in a lot of times we get these questions are like, hey, they're out there throwing, how do I decrease arm stress right now? And so there's like this instant, like, what's the best way to do it? And then there's these long-term type things. So let me answer this, Matt. The best thing you can do to decrease arm stress in a long-term fashion is to essentially do this. And that is, you really want to make sure that you are conditioning the muscles of the shoulder and the elbow and the core, which we'll talk about in a second, but the core in a time of season where throwing is not high, meaning you're not throwing a lot, you're not throwing a lot of competitive throws, you're not throwing high intensity throws. And the reason why I do that is because all of that work that's going to be done prior to the throwing intensity increasing or the volume increasing will allow for the stressful conditions that come with throwing to be tolerated by the body and by the arm. And if you haven't built that foundation, it will inherently be more stressful on your arm. And so I really want to emphasize the fact that a good preseason or off-season training program will pay massive dividends during season and especially at late season. Okay. And so the first thing you want to, ways we talk about decreasing arm stress, Matt, is to have a good off-season training program that addresses all the muscles that are involved with throwing, which is the entire body. So you need a good full body training program with more specifics into shoulder and elbow. And for the sake of time, I don't think I'm going to be able to cover all of those in a single podcast, but just know that those do exist. Matter of fact, a lot of the things, if you just go look at my YouTube channel and you did a bunch of those exercises, you just, picked a handful of mobility, picked a handful of arm care, even just one playlist on the arm care activities, and then basically picked a leg exercise, picked an arm exercise that involves pushing, pick a arm exercise that involves pulling, pick a core exercise, and pick a carry exercise, and you did 2 to 3 sets of each one of anywhere from 5 to 12 reps, and you did that 4 days a week. Bam, there's your good off-season training program. So there's an off-season training program that I kind of wrote, but actually didn't write. So, but something to think about there. You could do it that way. But you need a good off-season training program to allow for to be able to take the stresses that come over the course of a season. So that would be the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, especially if we're talking about youth. Here's what we do know about arm stress. It goes up with mechanics that are not good. And I know that sounds like the biggest obvious duh statement in the world, but one of the things that have been found in multiple studies in regards to youth pitching biomechanics is that their consistency of the mechanics is poor, meaning that they throw the ball differently more often. Instead of having repeatable and sound mechanics that would allow for a consistent delivery and, to be honest, to allow for the best use of the kinetic chain as possible. The more energy that you can generate and not lose through the kinetic chain link. Now, those that are like, wait, what's the kinetic chain link? It's essentially, think about this. You're going to generate power from your lower half in the throwing motion, and that power is generated. It's going to go up through your core. It's going to go up through your upper body. It's going to go into the shoulder, into the elbow, into the hand, into the baseball, and then be thrown. The less of that energy that you lose during that process will go into the ball, therefore will become more efficient and decrease arm stress. That is the most general statement I've ever said about biomechanics in regards to the throwing, and I know all the biomechanists are rolling their eyes at me right now, and that's okay. Because the whole point is, look, you need sound biomechanics, and they need to be repeatable. And if you do that, you're going to decrease arm stress. Now, it is difficult. Okay. In all honesty, the best way I've heard it summarized is essentially you need to have sound dynamic balance over a strong and steady posture. That's quoting Bob Keyes. He wrote a book called Pitching Biomechanics. It is fantastic, by the way. You should read it. It's worth a buy. It's worth a look. I will, no disclaimer, I get no royalties off this. I do have a part in that book. I had a say in it. I reviewed it. And so, yes, I'm a little biased towards it, but I also agree with everything he did and that he's looked at, and what the data that he has is really good. So Pitching Biomechanics by Bob Keyes. Anyways, you want to have a good dynamic balance over a strong and steady posture. If you just did that, your biomechanics are already going to be in good shape. The key is now you need to make them repeatable. If they're not repeatable, they're more than likely going to be creating energy loss, which then increases arm stress in the shoulder and in the elbow. And so you want good, sound, repeatable mechanics of throwing. If you don't have that, and Matt, you're specifically talking to you now a little bit more, and your youth baseball player, that is the thing I would spend the most time on, is getting your mechanics clean and sound and good. Then I would worry about other things after that. Now, realistically, you can do them all at the same time, but realistically, spend time on mechanics. Get to a good coach. Get to somebody who knows what they're doing and has seen good results and decreased injuries and has guys pitching for long periods of time. Find those mechanics and stick with them and make them repeatable. It's also the hardest thing that you're going to do. They did, this is informal, and I haven't looked at the study in a long time, but there's a study out of Japan, and they talked about the biomechanics of youth baseball players throwing out of Japan, and these players were throwing a lot. They had a lot of throws, but the difference was that the mechanics were more consistent over those time periods. And that's because the culture, at least, okay, sorry, I'm paraphrasing almost the study, and I apologize if I butcher this, and I'll have to make an entire podcast apology on this. But realistically, in the study, they talked about how the culture in Japan was all about making sure that the mechanics were sound and that they were good and they were repeatable. And they did a lot of repetitions to make sure that these were repeatable mechanics. Okay, so something to think about there. It's hard to do. It's not an easy process. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes effort, it takes reps. And if you're not doing that, you need to do that. Okay. So we talked about good preseason or off-season training program. We talk about sound, repeatable biomechanics. Okay, that's the second thing. The third thing we're going to talk about here is if you want to decrease arm stress, you got to make sure that all the joints that are involved in throwing, I know that's all of them, but let's just say shoulder and elbow, wrist, thoracic and lumbar spine. Okay, all of those joints that are involved, the range of motions in those joints is normal. Okay, within the normal ranges that they should be. If they are not, you will automatically increase arm stress. I can tell you right now that we know, based on a few studies of professional pitchers and most of them are major league data, I believe, that over the course of the season, that major league pitchers will increase external rotation, so lay back, going back this way. And those that can't see me, I'm basically, if it's that part of that motion where the arm looks like it's going behind the pitcher, they're still holding the ball, okay? That's layback. So the amount of external rotation that's going back, okay, will increase over the course of the season. The amount of internal rotation, which is going forward, okay, so arm coming forward, will decrease over the course of the season. The shoulder flexion will also decrease over the course of the season, and elbow extension, how straight you get your elbow, okay, will also decrease over the course of a season. And what we've seen in some of our throwers that have come in here is we'll see them, they'll maybe have a cranky elbow or a cranky shoulder, and I'll look at them and I'll be like, look, your elbow doesn't extend 10 degrees compared to the other side. And that's substantial enough for us that we want to take a look and figure it out. And a lot of times we'll try and do things to improve that range of motion. I will be honest, most all of them are not stretching. Okay, it doesn't work. It's typically the reason why they're losing range of motion is, bicep gets pretty gritty. And so we do a lot of massage and other things on the bicep to improve its mobility. And we also work on the backside of the elbow because sometimes it gets a little bit beat up back there. And we do that with mobilizations and some other things. So anyway, so you want all of your range of motion, your shoulder and your elbow, to be considered normal. Now, obviously, Matt, it's tough to test this on your sons in a way because you can't measure side to side. You can't be like, oh, look, my left side does this and my right side does this. They're going to be different. They're baseball players, and that's normal. They should be different. If you're concerned that range of motion is not appropriate, okay, then you may need to have somebody test it. And there's people out there who can do that. We've definitely done that virtually before, and it's been successful. But you need someone to test your range of motion. And I'll be honest, you need someone to test your range of motion in an appropriate baseball way. I can tell you right now, if I sent a client out to 5 physical therapists in the area that I'm at, I will most likely get anywhere from 3 to 5 range of motion values that are completely different. And that is because they don't measure it the same. You think they would, and they don't. I don't measure it the same. I measure based on the studies that have been done in baseball, so I have no data to compare it against, and that is the way baseball players should be measured. If I'll be honest, if you get someone that says, hey, look, I measured your external rotation, and it looks good, it's at 95 degrees, I would be like, awesome, and everything after that, I would just not trust, because if you have 95 degrees and you are a baseball pitcher, you are in trouble. Okay, you are not going to throw a ball very hard. And so you need a lot more than that. And so anyways, but if I'm not trying to talk negatively on anyone, but these are the things that I see. I'll have players that'll come into me, they look at my range of motion, they say, oh, my range of motion is fine, and I'll test the range of motion, and they have a 20-degree difference side to side because just the way they measured just didn't find the problem. So if you're wondering if range of motion is an issue for your sons, Matt, you can call us, we'll take care of it, or we can help you find someone who knows how to measure. Okay. And maybe we'll even come up with a way to measure that, like a quick measure. I don't know. We'll think about it. But we haven't found one yet that we've been able to be accurate enough without formal measurements. But anyways, third thing is we want to make sure all of your range of motion, your shoulder, elbow, wrist. We didn't even talk about range of motion in the wrist, but it's pretty obvious if you lose range of motion in the wrist. We want all of that to be normal. That decreases arm stress. So that was number 4, I believe. Okay, and then the fifth thing, which is probably going to be a little controversial, and I'm going to refer back to Bob Kai's Pitching Biomechanics book. They looked at this heavily. And one of the things they looked at were drills. These different types of drills, pivot, pick drills, and some other would be considered isolation throwing drills that are very popular currently. And they were able to, using their biomechanical data and the way they measured and filmed and analyzed it, they were able to essentially tell you, hey, this has a lot of arm stress. This has a little bit of arm stress, and kind of basically just say if it was good or bad. And I can tell you right now, they found none of these, drills were good. None of them. Okay, I should say none of them. They didn't study all of them, but they studied a lot of them. So all the ones that they studied were not good. They were just not good. So what I emphasize here is these isolation drills, albeit they do work, and what they're trying to do is to isolate certain motions and to essentially create an effect on that specific motion of throwing. The problem is that they work well. This is quoting Bob, but they work well. They do their job, but the problem is that makes you increase arm stress because the body has to work together. The body is one piece. Your power is essentially derived from your lower half and then transferred to your hand and then to the ball, then throwing. In those drills, you're taking out the lower half. You're taking out you're taking out rotation in the spine. You're taking out the kinetic chain principle and asking the arm to do something that it was not designed to do on its own. And that inherently increases arm stress. And I know a lot of people have seen success with it, but along with the success, and at about the same time duration when injuries in the elbow and shoulder have increased, and I should say more elbow than shoulder, but injuries in the elbow have increased during this time. It's the same time that these isolation drills have dramatically increased in their popularity and in the amount of time that they're being done. Okay, so what I tell everybody is this: if you're dead set, you got to do them. Fine, do them, but you don't ever do them at maximal intent, and you do them at a lower intent. Okay, I know there's a whole school of thought saying you should do a max intent, and they get results in regards to velocity, but I wonder if they get results in regards to velocity at the expense of injury. Okay, and so I'm just saying something to think about. There's some data suggesting it's a bad idea. I don't like them. We've seen results of increased velocity without doing these drills. Therefore, we've increased velocity without arm stress. Or arm stressing drills. And to me, I look at that and go, well, that makes way too much sense, right? I mean, why put additional stress on the arm if we don't have to? So anyways, kind of all over the place with this, Matt, and I apologize, but any of those isolation drills, they're not my favorite. I typically have people avoid them. I feel like there's other things we can do to improve the mechanics of the throwing that will also decrease arm stress and achieve the results that we want to see. Okay, so Matt, to answer your question, let's try and review this, and I apologize if I don't get all of these right, but these are the things that are on top of my head that I typically use. First and foremost, a good off-season training program to address all of the muscles that are important in throwing will help to decrease arm stress. You need sound, repeatable biomechanics of the throwing motion. Make sure that that's a priority. You want to normalize all of the range of motion that you have in your elbow and your shoulder, wrist as well. Okay. You want to make sure all those things are within the limits that they're supposed to be. And then you want to limit your amount of isolation work. And because again, it will likely increase arm stress just in the drills themselves. So, and we don't need to do that because throwing does that, all by itself. So, Matt, so there's one other that I wasn't sure I was going to include, but I'll mention it. This is something to think about. And so, and I don't have the data, and this is why I was kind of hesitating on mentioning it, but let me just mention it this way. They've instigated pitch count rules for a while now, right? And albeit at the little league level, it has helped with injuries, even though there's data suggesting that it actually hasn't, but there's also data suggesting that it has helped. But let's put it this way. They've instigated pitch counts and mandatory rest and all that kind of stuff. And yes, I think it has helped, but it hasn't really helped that much. Like, it hasn't solved the problem. We're still seeing as many injuries as we've ever seen before, albeit we're seeing different injuries now, but it's still there. And the reason is, yes, your pitch counts pitchers are pitching essentially less pitches per game. But one of the things that has been argued in some of the baseball circles now, and I would agree with, is that the total volume of throwing in a week, I don't think has changed. I think it's the same, or it actually has increased in not only volume, but also intensity. So think of it this way. And again, I'm kind of going off on my own tangent here with this, Matt, but just something to think about. What we used to see in the past is the kids would throw quite often. They would pitch long into games, and we were seeing injuries. In between those games, they would practice, they would throw, they'd do their normal things, right? And now what we're seeing is, when I say kids, let's put it into the teenage realm and into the high school realm, to the collegiate realm. What we're seeing now is they're throwing less intense or less pitches in a game, in a competitive environment. But what we're seeing more of is more plyo drills, more of these isolation drills during the week. So essentially what we've been trading is, instead of throwing more intentfully in competition and in games during a week, we're seeing less of that, but we're seeing higher arm stress throwing drills that are being done. So there's an argument out there suggesting that the total volume of throwing, the total volume of stressful events on the arm has actually gone up dramatically. And maybe that's one of the reasons we're seeing a spike in injury, but that's something else to think about. Is, guys throwing plyo balls. Maybe they don't consider that throwing, but those are just as stressful sometimes, if not more stressful on the arm than throwing in a game. And so one of the other things that we've been looking at is, hey, how often do you do this? How often do you do that? I can tell you right now, in our professional baseball pitchers throughout the course of a week, we are monitoring all throws. Sometimes formally, sometimes informally, but we are monitoring all throws. And saying, look, you're doing all these drills, great, but maybe we need to cut them down to once or two times a week. And during that time, you're only going to do them on these days, because now we can supply adequate rest, whatever. There's something to think about. But Matt, just to bring it back, it's not just throws in the game. It's the throws in practice. It's the throws in warm-ups. How many times I've thrown a bullpen in a week? It's these isolation drills that kids are doing, or players are doing, that are also inherently stressful. Okay, they're inherently stressful on the arm, and so it's something that we want to maybe need to take into consideration. So, Matt, to answer your question. I hope that does answer your question. I apologize. That's what I meant to say, but I hope it does answer your question. This gives you some things to look at and to do, and maybe we can come up with a few more tactical things here for you. I kind of talked about the training program a little bit. Realistically, if you want to start a very basic, easy starting way, would be go to my YouTube channel, search free weight arm care. There should be a playlist. There's 4 exercises. Start doing that, 3 sets of 10. And then look up throwing elbow exercises, I believe. Start doing that, 3 sets of 10. And then I need you to go find band hip hinge on the YouTube. That would be 2 to 3 sets of 5 with a pretty good, decent band. I need you to go and search suspension trainer rows. That's 2 to 3 sets of 8. Go search push-ups. Just push-up would be fine. 2 sets of 5. I know it's not very many. You can go up to 8, but 2 sets of 5 to start. Let's see, what else do we normally do? Go search. Trying to make sure that we have these filmed. I don't know if we have a med ball squat clean or a med ball clean throw. We might. If we do, search that. 2 sets of 5. Then you're going to do 2 sets of 5 of suspension trainer Supermans. You're going to do 2 sets of a kettlebell rack carry. So search that. And that should do it. There's your training program. If you just did that for 40 sessions, 40 workouts, can be in the row or not in a row, but 40 workouts in a row or 40 workouts total, I think you're going to be in good shape. Just gradually increasing your numbers and weights. It's something that's worked and has worked very well in the past. And so that would be more tactical for you there, Matt. So that would be like that off-season training program. That could be done in season, by the way, too. 40 workouts, I would say, if you want to see pretty good results, 4 to 5 days a week. That's where I do it. Let's see. Biomechanics, find a pitching coach. Find a pitching coach that can see this kind of thing or can help and get good feedback. And so I think it's worth going and find a pitching coach. If you don't have one, you can reach out to us as well. Happy to maybe put you in a direction. There's good virtual options now, to be honest, especially at the youth level. Like, there's a lot of things that can be done virtually. Obviously, it's a little bit better in person, but you could do it that way. Find a pitching coach for your repeatable mechanics. Range of motion, we kind of talked about this. So do this, Matt. I mean, again, I want you to be able to do this like right away. So this is not best case scenario. You need someone to measure, really. But when you go take your son and lightly have him stand up, take his throwing arm, go into layback, okay? And what you're going to do is it just kind of push his arm into further layback, okay? So just kind of push it. I can't show it in a video because I can't turn sideways out. Hit my mic. But anyways, turn sideways, arm up at 90 degrees. Oh, maybe this will work. 90 degrees, and then push them into layback as far as they can go without hurting them. Okay, just nice and light. Get a feel for where it is. Okay, if it doesn't get close to horizontal or parallel to horizontal to the ground, then I would consider going somewhere and get it measured. Okay. Now, I don't think you're going to get very close, and the only time we ever see that arm get back there and get close to the horizontal is usually during the throwing motion. So maybe that would be something else you could do is take a video of your son who's throwing and see if that arm gets close to the horizontal. If it doesn't, let's go get it measured. All right, let's go find somebody to measure it. That'll help you. Have your kids go, arms out straight, both, looking at them both. I can't do this. Can't see it. But arms out straight and see if one elbow bends more than the other. If it does, you need to get figured out why. Just those two. Do those two. Okay. Do those two. Let's see. And then just avoid the pivot pip drills or those isolated drills. I just avoid them. It's just easier to avoid them than it is to try and push through and do them. And keep track of how much your kids are throwing. I mean, you don't have to be, crazy about it and just being like tallying every single one and punching it in. But, don't let them go out there and just willy-nilly throw forever. And also I wouldn't necessarily restrict them either. I mean, if they're kids, let them go have fun. But yeah, I'd kind of just keep an eye on and have it. What I'd want to be is like, hey, if I walked up to you, be like, hey, Matt, how's it going? Hey, it's between Monday and Friday of this week. It's now, say it's Saturday. Hey, between Monday and Friday this week, how many times do you think your kid threw? How many total throws do you think he's had? If you can ballpark it and be like, yeah, he's probably had like 150, or these numbers are made up, by the way. Okay. But he's at 150 or right around that. If you have an idea, that's what I want. That's what I would encourage you to have, is have an idea of how much he's thrown. If you have an idea, then what we're going to know pretty quickly is if he's getting closer to the too much end, or if he's getting, or he's not throwing enough. Right. And I would include any throw, right? Any throw. Yeah. Throwing a football, maybe. But, I mean, if he's throwing plow balls, 100% you're counting those. Those are high stress or higher stress. Baseball, for sure. Wiffle balls, probably. Why not? And just get a sense of it. So, Matt, I hope this helps. And I hope that those who are listening, I hope it helps you too. I know this is a big, big time subject, and I'm not doing it great justice and very specific things. But if you could take anything away from the podcast today, which is what we just talked about, go back to when I just laid out to Matt what he needs to do. That if you do just that, you're going to be way ahead at decreasing the amount of arm stress that your player or you as the player is going through. I highly encourage you to do that. If you do have questions, you can always reach out to us here at Athletic Potential. We're happy to answer any of those, not just here on the podcast, but also just in general. It's something we do all the time. Okay, all the time. I had this question the other day, and I probably shouldn't err on say this out loud, but look, we answer so many questions. We don't charge for those kind of things, okay? If you have a question, call, email, whatever, we'll answer it. That's what we're here for. We're here to get out good information. If you need something maybe it's different, but realistically, we can put good information in your hands very quickly so that you can make good decisions, okay? And it's not something we pay for. I had somebody who's like, hey, I want to ask you this question, but how much does it cost? And I go, it doesn't. It doesn't cost you anything to ask me a question, and I will answer it as best I can, right? I mean, we talk about this podcast. That's what the reason this podcast exists, is so that we take these questions that we're getting a lot and we can answer them so that everybody can have them, okay? Our goal at Athletic Potential here is to keep the players on the field and participating in sport and having fun and keeping them away from the clinic. We don't want to have to treat. We want them to advance in their career. We want to, again, achieve their full athletic potential. And it's hard to do that if you're injured. And so we would try to give out this good information. So I hope this helps. Thanks everybody for listening to the podcast. Appreciate you taking the time. And until next time, thank you. Hey everybody, I just want to say thank you for listening to the Athletic Potential Podcast. If you do have questions for the podcast, please visit the website, www.athletic-potential.com/podcast. You'll find a button there to ask your question. Please input your information and your question, and we will answer any and all questions we get. And thank you again for listening. If you do get a chance, please rate and review the podcast. And until next time, thanks.